Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Pam Fairman, Bellevue Parks and Community Services Capital Project Manager. We're here this evening to look at the future of Bellevue, Meydenbauer Bay Park, and explore expanding the existing park east toward downtown and Old Bellevue. To better understand how we can grandly connect the downtown to our Lake Washington waterfront, and importantly, provide more opportunities for you, our community, to access our beautiful Northwest views, shoreline, and water. This evening, we're excited to share updated designs of the park expansion and a proposed phased implementation plan. Implementation of the master plan will take multiple future phases of design and development beyond this next second phase of development. The city will re-engage with the neighborhood and greater community at each of these future phases of any development. The design and phasing is based on the 2010 Meydenbauer Bay Park and Land Use Plan and driven by what we've heard from you over this past year and a half, combined with research of city codes, traffic, and park use. We have a survey online live tonight as of this evening where you can provide feedback on the updated design. And now I'd like to hand this off to our consultant team to share the design and phasing of the park expansion. Andy, would you like to take it from here?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Pam. Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Mitten with the Burger Partnership, and it's great to have everybody here tonight. And we're excited to go through and talk about the future of Meydenbauer Bay Park. A lot of time spent in going through the design and phasing approach, and all of this that's been shaped by your input over the last year. So to kick us off, the purpose of this project is to continue the work of the 2010 Meydenbauer Bay Park Plan and Land Use Plan, as Pam mentioned, and build off the success of the existing park, which you can see here dashed in green on this map. Meydenbauer Bay Park is a striking setting located to the southwest of downtown Bellevue along the shores of Lake Washington, near Downtown Park and Wildwood Park. The focus of the expansion in the area seen here in dark blue is to create enhanced connections between downtown, the waterfront, and the existing park. This project, as it was defined in the 2010 plan, creates several exciting new public spaces. To get you oriented, the expansion is divided into areas we will explore together in this presentation. Seen on the screen, adjacent to the existing park, we will start at the corner of 99th Avenue Southeast, indicated by the pink polygon on the screen. Moving counterclockwise from here is the Shoreline Promenade, shown in green, the Marina, shown in blue, 100th Avenue Southeast and surrounding areas shown in orange, and connections along Lake Washington Boulevard, shown in teal. Guidelines for this project are principles identified in the 2010 Park and Land Use Plan, today's physical and permitting realities, and community priorities that you told us about in the fall of 2023 through the summer of 2024. Community engagement has been a big influence on shaping future development for the park. To date, we've completed 2 online surveys, hosted 12 community events, and ongoing website updates, with outreach in 8 languages reaching over 10,300 people. As you can see on the slide, during fall and summer, we were focused on raising awareness about the project and gathering your feedback as plans progressed. Your feedback and priorities have shaped the plans we are presenting here tonight. Now I'd like to pause for a moment. We're going to have our second poll question. And we would like to know how you all have been involved in Meydenbauer Bay Park's growth. So we'll take a moment here to let you answer the questions that just showed up on the screen. All right. Well, that's great that we have actually a good percentage of people here joining us for the first time. So it's great to have you here. We'll walk through the rest of the plan now. Where we are currently is at the stage of confirming and finalizing direction on park design. As noted earlier, we have a survey available through December 15th to confirm we've accurately reflected your priorities and have improved upon the park. We will be finalizing our proposed designs and implementation plan for the park expansion by spring of 2025. Priorities we've heard over the past year are represented on this slide. In the green are mobility considerations. These include suggestions to improve connections and accessibility within and around the park, improve safety, and reduce traffic congestion. In the orange are some community and environmental needs. Prioritizing nature, shade, and climate change resilience has been a big topic. We've also heard that additional amenities like food and recreation vendors are wanted in the park. Parking, as it turns out, is a divided camp, as you can see in the blue quadrant of the pie chart. About half of the people we heard from asked to deprioritize additional parking, and half asked to add parking. The marina, represented in pink, also has many demands placed upon it, with people requesting a better balance between day use, visitor moorage, long-term moorage, and personal watercraft infrastructure. In our summer 2024 survey, we asked the community to prioritize the area of the park to help develop the proposal for phased construction. The highest priorities were the Lake Washington Boulevard connections, kite site, 100th Avenue Southeast, and parking, followed by the shoreline, 99th Avenue Southeast, and marina improvements. While there is funding allocated for new park improvements, there are not adequate resources available to build out the entire project. Looking at some early cost estimates, it appears there is sufficient funding to build out the kite site, 100th Avenue Southeast improvements, and some of the shoreline improvements in the next phase of construction. This would likely also include stair access between the kite site and shoreline, and follows the priorities we heard from you on what should be implemented next. Additional amenities and connections will be developed as partnerships and budgets become available. The dashed areas will be the focus for the subsequent phase of development. The completion of the shoreline work in the marina will likely be the last areas to be improved due to permitting complexities and cost. The addition of an activity building was ranked lowest, which we'll speak more to later in the presentation. We will now walk you through the updated designs for the fully built out project, starting with the kite site. The kite site, called this because of its shape, is bordered by Lake Washington Boulevard Northeast and 100th Avenue Southeast. This area is largely unchanged from what was presented this past summer. The design for this space is driven by intuitive, magnetic, and a universally accessible experience connecting downtown Bellevue from Main and 100th all the way to Lake Washington, and is part of the city's grand connection. Here is a sketch that provides insight on how people would experience the new space. A plaza, shown in pink, is situated at the corner of Main and 100th to welcome people coming from downtown. A pavilion in blue integrated into the plaza provides covered, iconic space with focused views out to the bay. This weather-protected gathering space has the potential to host park vendors and an interactive fountain. A path, the orange arrow, up to the roof of the pavilion brings people above the surrounding buildings to see the bay and the mountains. This bird's eye view shows the plaza space under the pavilion and how it connects down the hill. An accessible pathway experience integrates vegetation, views, and seating while it journeys down to the shoreline. Spaces for people to relax and enjoy the views are provided along the path, and a stair creates a more direct route to the water. The walkway experience floats over parking and touches down at 100th Avenue Southeast, creating easy access to parking and the surrounding neighborhood. On the next slide, we will take a look at what is layered underneath this bird's eye view of the pathways. Strategically located below the park spaces above, the team has consolidated parking into a more condensed and easy to find spot within the park. The pathways above tuck parking away from view and creates easy access to the water and existing park. Across the street, a parcel east of 100th Avenue Southeast provides additional parking. We'll pause here for a moment too to take a look at our third poll question for tonight. I'll give it a moment for that to load. And we're curious to know what your favorite parts of the kite site design are. We'll give a moment here. All right, thank you for participating. Looks like a large percentage are interested in the nature and views, which is great to hear. All right. So let me get my place here in my notes. There we go. 100th Avenue Southeast will remain a two-way road, but will be narrowed to slow vehicle traffic and make it a more pedestrian-friendly experience. Narrowing the street will intuitively slow vehicle speeds and discourage commercial traffic. Access to existing and new buildings will be maintained and pedestrian crossings will be added where the slope allows for safe crossing. At the bottom of the street, where bigger trucks are known to get stuck in today's condition, the curve and slope of the street is changed to allow safe truck passage. Circled in this image, the pathway continues to the shore using an elevated sloped walkway that we call the Bay Connector. This pathway travels between the two existing large conifers shown in the dark green dots on the screen and bridges over the driveway to the view apartments shown by the blue dashed arrow. The path is shaped to create a fantastic experience, provide an iconic portal into the park, and create an accessible route to the shoreline without reliance on an elevator. Integrated into the experience is strategic screening that also provides considerations for nearby neighbors. The Bay Connector is the icon of the expanded park, an elevated version of the existing curvilinear pier. As seen on the image on the screen here, the Bay Connector celebrates incredible views of Meydenbauer Bay. The Bay Connector extends over one of the existing piers, Pier 3, and hugs the shoreline to connect to the shoreline promenade near where visitor moorage exists today. Along the way, moments of pause and playfulness are integrated, like seat steps or maybe even lounging nets like you see here in this photo that are suspended over the water. At the prow, seen on the image on the screen, the Bay Connector looks out towards the mouth of the bay and views of Seattle and the Whaler Building. For those who know the area, this feature is at the same height as the parking lot of the View Apartments. The Bay Connector swoops over shoreline plantings and the water and connects to the shoreline promenade as seen here. Shoreline vegetation is layered in to enhance the bay's ecology. The existing shoreline bulkhead wall is removed and regraded to a more natural shoreline with a gradual slope. Floating wetlands are being considered to enhance the ecology of the site and provide beneficial fish habitat in the nearshore environment that will help dissipate high wave energy. And we now have our fourth and final poll question. We're wanting to know, based on what you just saw, what might be your favorite aspect of the Bay Connector and the shoreline development? All right, perfect. Thank you everybody for participating. So next we'll talk a little bit more about the shoreline promenade. The existing park promenade is extended along the length of the shoreline to 100th Avenue Southeast, where it merges with the Bay Connector. The promenade is edged with places to pause and areas of seating with views out to the bay, strengthening connection to nature and the existing beautiful park. Some vehicle provisions are provided in this area. For the general public, ADA parking and unloading areas are provided at the ends of 100th Avenue Southeast and 99th Avenue Southeast. The path is a minimum of 20 feet wide, allowing occasional emergency and maintenance access to the existing and new park. At the end of the shoreline promenade by the existing park is the Whaler Plaza. This is a public plaza space that provides multiple functions. It will provide a seamless connection between the existing park and the new shoreline promenade. It allows car access down 99th Avenue Southeast, similar to today for ADA parking and unloading. It will provide emergency access to the park. It celebrates the preserved whaling building, creates an entry to the public pier, and integrates the cool phone booth as a quirky amenity. The ice house or caretaker's house is re-envisioned as a gateway into the existing park, providing sheltered space and housing critical park services such as new ranger station, while also creating better travel to the personal watercraft launch points. The existing beach house picnic area anchors the connection between the existing park and the expansion. A new covered space is added to the beach house to provide additional shelter and shade. On the screen, you can see the existing condition shown on the top and the added shelter shown on the bottom. During summer engagement, we asked for your priorities for the marina and heard the need for a balance between motorized boat infrastructure, non-motorized boat infrastructure, pedestrian experience of docks, visual access to open water, and stewardship of ecology. To balance these needs, the updated design removes one of the monthly moorage piers and makes the whaling building pier almost entirely publicly accessible, with a focus on visitor moorage, a kayak dock, and pedestrian access to the majority of the dock. A public floating dock is added to enhance lake access for non-motorized watercraft, and rentable lockers being big enough for a kayak or a stand-up paddleboard are integrated near the beach as seen here west of the existing whaling building. There are currently 14 visitor slips and 81 monthly slips available. The updated marina relocates 14 visitor slips to a deeper location off a floating dock and reduces the number of monthly slips to 31. After extensive research, it is determined that extending and reconfiguring the piers to meet the 2010 plan numbers is infeasible to current navigability regulations and shoreline habitat best practices. Unloading areas are provided at either end of the shoreline promenade, with marina tenant parking available off of 100th Avenue Southeast at the kite site. Now we're going to change gears a little bit, but before we continue our park journey, we're going to talk about our parking strategy. As mentioned previously, feedback from the community showed opinion split between increasing parking in the park and deprioritizing parking. To balance these needs, parking was carefully studied to understand current use patterns and anticipated future need. This diagram shows the existing areas of parking in the park. There are small and large parking areas. The smaller lots are easy to find and often full, while the larger lots are harder to find and often have spots available. The existing large shoreline lot is the most underused parking in the park today. By moving the shoreline stalls to the kite site, both parking and vehicular circulation will become more intuitive and integrated into the park experience. The new parking distribution will look like this diagram, with small areas of ADA and unloading at the shoreline and large areas off parking at the kite site. Parking quantity was calculated by looking at utilization of existing parking, codes guiding parking quantities for select uses, and anticipated demand of parking for the proposed new park amenities. Demand was estimated for a typical nice weather summer weekday evening. Based on this data, the proposed parking provides 16 more stalls when compared to today's condition. All needed parking can be accommodated off of 100th Avenue Southeast, which frees the 99th Avenue Southeast site from the burden of providing additional parking. The 2010 plan proposed an activity building and parking off of 99th Avenue Southeast. This building was deprioritized by the community during the summer engagement event. In response to this, the 2024 plan proposes to reassess in the future if an activity building is needed as the community and city evolves over time. The proposed amenity instead includes paths and stairs, providing easier connections down the hill with seating and covered spaces. The natural slope is a fun opportunity to add hillside slides and play scrambles, similar to the image on the left of the screen. This proposed build out is a budget-friendly way of layering in new park amenities we heard the park needs, and does not prevent adding an activity building or parking at a later date if the need arises. Connecting from 99th to 100th, Lake Washington Boulevard Northeast is improved with a pedestrian sidewalk and bicycle infrastructure on the south side and enhanced pedestrian crossings at the Main Street, Lake Washington Boulevard 100th intersection. This connection was ranked as the first priority by the community, and city departments are collaborating to make this happen. Near term, the Bike Bellevue initiative is currently extending bike lanes between 99th Avenue Southeast and Main Street. The long-term vision is to add pedestrian connections, plantings that will allow separation of pedestrians and cars where possible, and screening to preserve privacy of the adjacent apartments and homes. Now that we've walked through the project, we'll zoom out to look at the entire park as one, connecting Old Main to the water and to the Phase 1 park. The newly expanded Meydenbauer Bay Park, an iconic Bellevue waterfront destination, will be easier to access and include more opportunities to enjoy nature, recreation, and our community. With that, I'd like to extend the team's heartfelt thank you for your participation in this process guiding the future of your park. Now I'm going to pass the mic off to Sarah, who will be our moderator for today's question and answer session. Sarah?
Thank you so much, Andy, for walking us through how all those amazing designs came to be. We're excited to hear what you all think in the audience and our community members who couldn't make it today. As a reminder, please take our survey, which is live on Engaging Bellevue. And you can either scan the QR code that you see on the screen, or you can also go to the link mb-park.com. And this is held on the Engaging Bellevue website and will reflect a lot of the designs you saw here today. And so we're really curious to see if we responded to your needs. And when you complete the survey, you can enter a raffle to win complimentary ice skating tickets, courtesy of Bellevue Downtown Ice Rink. We're going to transition now to our moderated question and answer session. As a reminder, attendees will remain muted and cameras off for the Q&A. We invite you to answer your question by clicking the Q&A button shown here on the screen, and then you'll submit your question. If you would like to turn on closed captioning at any time, please select the CC button. You may not see your question asked exactly, as we will try to combine similar questions and themes and maybe add clarification. If your questions are property related or personal, we will reach out to you via chat for your email to follow up separately. If any questions are inappropriate or contain hate speech, they will be dismissed. We have a knowledgeable panel today to answer your questions. So there will be a core group of project staff who are going to speak to you today and answer all of your questions. I see a lot coming in. First, I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have Pam Fairman, who is our Bellevue Parks and Community Services Capital Project Manager. Scott Vanderheiden, our Bellevue Parks Capital Projects Coordinator. Zarian Smith, a Bellevue Parks project manager and also our marina expert. Andrea Tons, Bellevue Community Development. Kevin McDonald, Bellevue Transportation with multimodal transportation specialty. Andy Mitten, who is with Berger Partnership and the lead landscape architect. Guy Michelson, also with Berger, lead landscape vision. Christina Merton with Herrera, and she is our shoreline environmental expert. Colleen Mitchell, also with Herrera, and our civil engineering experts. And lastly, Mike Jobs, who is with Miller Hull, leading the architecture vision for the pavilion space. All right, we're going to get started answering your questions. So, up first, question for Pam and Andrea. Referring to the kite sites, is there a reason housing is not included in the rectangular parcel east of 100th Avenue Southeast?
Let's see. I think I would respond that housing could certainly be considered for that space. From a park development perspective, we would not be building the housing. If we are approached by or have an opportunity to work with a developer or organization to develop housing, we would be more than happy to.
Andrea, do you have anything to add?
I would just like to point out that the city did adopt an affordable housing strategy in 2017 with the idea to increase access and availability of affordable housing. So if you have more interest in that, then just check out the city website.
Thank you both. All right, question for Pam and Scott. What is the timeline for the full project?
Oh, it looks like you're muted, Scott.
Sorry about that. I can start it off. At this point, we do not have a full timeline for construction. We'll have a much better idea, I think, once we get to the end of this expansion and we know exactly what we're going to build and the costs that are associated, things like that. I can tell you that once we do begin construction design of whatever we're going to build, we are probably looking at I would venture to say probably a year and a half to 2 years before we would actually get to construction, just for the permitting and the construction design portion of it. So at least that gives you an idea of how far out the second expansion would be.
I would add that I would expect us to start construction 3 years out. I'd probably bump that up, Scott. I think between design and permitting, when we're talking shoreline permitting and heading to the state, it's going to be a little bit longer. When you say full build out, if you're talking the whole park, that's going to be so incredibly dependent upon when budgeting becomes available for the third, fourth, or fifth phase of development, and we certainly don't have a schedule for that.
Thank you so much.
I'm a little more optimistic, but I always am, right, Pam?
You are.
Next, we have a question for Andy and Mike. How are you going to make the park more accessible?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So as we walked through in the presentation, this expansion portion of the project allows an excellent opportunity to actually provide an accessible route that anybody in a mobility device or pushing a stroller or anything wheeled will be able to have ramped access from the intersection of 100th and Main and Lake Washington Boulevard all the way down to the shoreline. That is what the Bay Connector allows. And so it really is a great opportunity to not only integrate parking accessible parking, which we know is limited and its capacities right now with the current build out, and really provide a lot of opportunities along the way. There's been a lot of thinking going into how to make it as accessible as possible given the challenges of how steep the site is. Mike, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that with the kite site development.
The only thing I think I'd add is that to point out each parking tray we showed that's sort of underlaying all of the accessible path has a point at which you can walk straight onto that accessible path. So imagine this accessible path draped on the site, and every point it touches is a point to access it. So you don't have to stay on it. You're not stuck in a habit trail and you're stuck in it. You can get off at every point. You can also, if you're someone that lives there and jogging through, you don't have to go down the whole zigzag. You can hit it at different points and get off it on stair runs and everything. So it's accessible in many ways, but most importantly, each parking tray has a point where you just roll right on to some point on the accessible path. We're aiming for universal accessibility. Like from any point, you can roll to any other point. It's not a linear thing necessarily. It looks linear, but when you're experiencing it in reality, you'll have a chance to roll up or down from any point on the site.
Thank you both for that. Next, we have a question for Andy and Christina. This design represents a major reduction of boat moorage in an area that already has a shortage of slips. I understand you can't modify the piers as they are today while still meeting the environmental regulations, but why can't you keep the 3 existing piers as is alongside the park improvements?
Thanks, Sarah. And that's an excellent question. And this is one that we definitely have been trying to balance a lot of different competing needs through the design process. As we noted in the presentation, we are not only thinking about how to accommodate those that have boat slips, we're also thinking about visitors who come to the marina on boats, but we're also trying to balance ecology and those who are using personal watercraft and people who just want general access to the water. We were following closely the slip numbers that were in the 2010 Park and Land Use Plan, and that's what drove what is currently represented in the designs that we presented tonight. Christina, I don't know if you have a point that you want to add to that, or Pam as well, if you wanted to say anything.
Yes, well, the design that we're looking at now and that was presented tonight is a really awesome opportunity to expand the shoreline experience and ecology benefit in this area. And I think that balance with meeting the 2010 plan for slip quantity is what we're trying to balance here in this unique location for ecological benefit.
Thank you for responding, Andy and Christina. I think I'd just add that really it does come down to a balance in what we've heard from the community. Our previous surveys have informed that community priority as far as water access and wanting to see and view the water and take obstructions away from that view and having access along the shoreline.
Great, thank you all. Next, we have a question for Guy, Andy, and Christina, and anyone else that would like to answer here. So the elevated bay connector is obstructive to neighborhood views. What are you doing to support screening into neighbor spaces? And this is a two-parter. When was the shoreline path changed from being grade level to the shore? Also, They thought the Department of Ecology was not going to allow this type of structure into the lake. Let me know if you need me to repeat any part of that.
I'll give it a shot. I'll start,
Okay.
and if you can remind me if I missed something, or certainly lean on my teammates to answer some of these questions. I think these are all great questions, so thank you. But as a designer, now I'm going to play semantics, which is the bay connector will definitely be visible, but I don't think it is obstructing views. It is part of the view. It's envisioned as being a beautiful piece of design and an exceptional experience. And well, as it is part of that view, I think it needs to be considered in what's there now, for example. So right now, at that same elevation, you're looking at the roofs of the cover over the docks. So that view isn't there now. And in the plup, that same walkway was going to be there from the kite site out to the water's edge. But in that instance, there was actually going to be a larger, taller elevator tower that was going to be performing that role. So there was going to be a significant element there. And the bay connector is actually a smaller and more nimble intervention. And then what I would also say is, in addition to being aesthetically beautiful, it goes back to the question that Andy had about, is this site accessible? And one of the ways we want to do that is an accessible experience wants to be the same great experience for all. And it's not a matter of just providing ramps. We're also mindful that this is a lot of elevation. So if we were to just do a ramp that gained all this elevation, it would not be a pleasant experience. So one of the ways we do is we make the journey an amazing experience. And that's part of what the Bay Connector is doing. And so it creates universal accessibility that Andy was talking about that doesn't feel like a ramp, but is wonderful and it's enjoyed. And we think it will become one of the signatures of the city. We think it'll be beautiful. It will be the sort of the grand west terminus of the Grand Connection. And we think it'll be beloved. We really do. So definitely part of a view that's not really there now. And we think it will be great. I think I missed some of the parts of the question. Can you help me out there, Sarah?
Yeah. Maybe I'll ask this for Christina. So this person is curious what the Department of Ecology and generally what the environmental considerations were.
Yes, so part of our siting of the connection walkway is to be able to use existing piers that are in the water already and making sure that we're not adding additional structures into the water. And then also making sure that it's at a height in which shading isn't going to affect those lovely ecology opportunities at the near shore to allow fish to move, specifically salmonids, to move along the shoreline, which is their preferred location, to be able to migrate in and out of the lake as they progress in their life. So this structure is going to be not only an opportunity to have that awesome visual aspect that Guy spoke to, but it's going to give us that room to be able to let the ecology and plant growth be below it and be able to have that component to this site.
Thank you so much. And lastly, I'm going to ask a clarifying question for Andy. Can you help the audience understand what screening measures might look like to protect neighbor privacy?
Yeah, so these elements definitely need to be studied further. But I think a key critical piece to keep in mind is as we design this, thinking about how to focus people's views out over the water and not direct them right at adjacent buildings. And its placement allows us to do that very carefully and successfully, we think. There's also some things that we can do with how we manage some of the railings by altering the heights of those, and some other techniques we can do just in how we orient the pathway as it moves down through the area. So there is even in some cases, as the ramped walkway gets lower down, we can start to use vegetation. We're trying to be very careful there though, because we don't want to be blocking residents' views that are above this, that are looking out over it. So we're trying to balance a lot of different things and make sure we're directing views and providing or promoting positive park use of the space.
Okay, thank you all for that. Next, we have a question for Pam and Scott. Another two-parter. Will parking be free or will people need to pay? And will there be EV charging available?
As there is now in the park, we have, yes, we do have easy charge electrical charging for vehicles, and I'm sure that will be a high priority in the new parking scheme for us to include that. I can't imagine that it wouldn't. I'm sorry, Sarah, what was the second part of that?
Will the parking be free or paid?
The parking will be, as far as I know, will be free. And also keep in mind that the parking counts and the parking that will be available will be for park use only, not for other uses in the downtown area. So there will need to be some sort of check and balance on making sure that whether it's in a certain number of hours or usage, making sure it's for park use only.
Pam, do you have anything to add, or did that answer the question pretty well?
I think that answered the question quite well. Thanks, Scott.
All right. Question for Andy and Pam. Will Pier 3 be immediately available for public short-term moorage? Will Pier 1 accommodate tour boats who can bring shoppers and diners to Main Street and beyond?
So I may need to clarify here, because Pier 3 would be in the proposed design would be for long-term moorage, and short-term moorage would be at Pier 1. And I'm assuming by immediately available would mean when the next piece gets implemented. The marina redevelopment won't occur for quite some time. So that would be a change that will happen down the road, and there will be more planning around that in the future. Pam, do you want to talk about the second part of that question?
Sure. Currently, this last summer, we had a pilot program with a boat outing. I don't know if anybody in the audience was able to participate in that, but there was a pilot program. And if that is supported, a pilot program to take off in a boat, and we, the city, contracted for those services with the support, again, of the community, then that could indeed be provided at what would be at the public Pier 1. I just wanted to underline the fact that the marina was the lowest or last phase that the community was interested in seeing occur. So we are many years out on a change to actual changes at the marina. So I'm a little worried about the word immediately there, that this is not going to happen immediately.
Thank you both. Okay, question for Pam and Kevin. Why is Lake Washington Boulevard rated as the top priority from the community, but not in the first position for implementation?
I can start with that, and I can say that section of Lake Washington Boulevard has long been part of the pedestrian bicycle transportation plan that was adopted in 2009. The Bike Bellevue initiative has sort of accelerated interest in that corridor, and the Transportation Commission this year recommended that we build the bike lane as quickly as possible. So that would involve basically restriping the existing asphalt surface rather than rather than expanding the roadway. So it is in design right now, and it would probably be implemented maybe in 2025, but more likely in 2026.
I can share from the park perspective. Any portion of the park that we improve, for instance, assuming we proceed with the kite site, as Andy shared, we would be responsible for making frontage street improvements on that site. And so we would work on that portion of Lake Washington Boulevard, Main Street, right away. That would be part of the plan, as well as working with transportation to improve that crosswalk, that signaled crosswalk at Main Street and 100th.
Right. Thank you, Pam and Kevin. Question for Zarian and Pam. There's a backlog for marina slips in the city of Bellevue. How will the city support access to the water to make up for the reduction of slips? How will the city determine who loses their slips?
I'm going to say that we don't have an answer for that when those slips are lost 6 to 10 to 15 years from now. We're not working on the marina at this point in time. But again, I will go back to this is a balance, and it is a balance of access to water for the entire community. And it will be evaluated again with the community when we pick this the marina up to plan in the future.
I would just add probably we would need to be further along with the details of this plan, getting down into this exact size of the slips and things of that nature in order to develop a strategy for what slips would stay and what tenants would move and whatnot. So we're still ways out from that.
Okay, thank you both. Question for Scott and Pam. People get frustrated trying to find parking during the summer months. What is the timeline for adding the 100th Avenue Southeast parking?
Well, I think we kind of touched on that earlier. We don't have an exact timeline when the construction of the kite site will begin, but we are, well, as Pam would say, probably she says 2 to 3 years out to begin any kind of construction at all on the site. So at that point, we'd be looking at building that 100th parking.
Can I chime in with a comment too? Just a little, it's not actually specific to the parking, but it's about the global access to this park. And I think one of the things that is most exciting about this design, I keep looking oddly up here because I have a plan of it on the wall. One of the things that I think is really exciting about this design is it is entirely focused on access, and parking is part of that. But the Grand Connection vision for the city is really coming into play, and this is that western terminus. And this whole project plus the Grand Connection is really, right now, Meydenbauer Bay Park is sort of isolated from the city. And this project and the Grand Connection project are really weaving it into the fabric of the city. So yes, there will be more parking. On the hardest parking days, there will always be parking challenges anywhere. Bellevue Square has parking challenges sometimes, and they've got a lot of parking. But one of the cool things that this project does is it weaves this park into the city for so many people to get there in ways in addition to a car. So it's not just about cars, but it is a lot about that added access by tying it to the city.
Yeah, and I think we need to do a better job too of wayfinding to get people to the other parking areas for this park. In particular, we have a little gem of a parking area in the old, the very old Meydenbauer Park that is not used, I believe, near enough. And so, as a Parks Department, I think we need to do a better job to get people to see that there are other areas to park than off of what will be 100th, or right now even at the marina itself. So.
Question for Pam. Was the parking along the south side of Lake Washington Boulevard, which will be lost with the improvements, considered in the original stall count? If not, can this capacity be added into the plan?
Wow, okay. There's a couple of parking spaces along Lake Washington Boulevard. There is at the park overlook, there is parking that will not be impacted, that will remain, and those parking spots will remain. If you're talking about the parking on the right of way along Lake Washington Boulevard, those I'm going to have to defer to Kevin, because I believe those are going to go away with the bike lane improvement, but Kevin can confirm that. And we would not be providing parking for those displaced parking that occurred in the right of way. We did not build those, and nor were they counted in the parking for the park.
And Pam, you did ask the specific question about whether those would be replaced on the park site, and that, I believe, is the correct answer. And the installation of the bicycle facilities along Lake Washington Boulevard would be, the consequence of that would be further removal of the parking spaces on Lake Washington Boulevard in the right of way. A stormwater utility project has sort of displaced about half of the previously existing parking spaces, and the installation of the bike lane would displace.
All right. Can someone confirm whether they can hear me all right? I'm having some freezing. Okay, great.
We can hear you.
Lovely.
I think Kevin was just having some challenges there.
Okay. Well, I have another question for Kevin. And we can maybe return to it if we keep having technical difficulties. But what public transit improvements are being made to increase access options?
Well, I think the opportunity to access transit through this project is more in the enhancement of facilities for people walking and biking to get to the existing transit service that is in downtown. To the best of my knowledge, there's no plan to expand or extend any of the existing transit service to specifically serve the Meydenbauer Park. But like we've been talking about, improving pedestrian and bicycle access is part of the plan, and we would implement that in some cases sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, a question for Pam and Scott. Can some of the small boat moorage be dedicated to small, non-motorized sailboats for sailing lessons or boat rentals?
Pam, I can start off, and maybe Zarian would want to chime in on this as well. I don't think we've determined at this point exactly what the small craft is going to look like overall. We do know we want to make access much better than it is today. The access for folks to come down and launch boats, it's very difficult and cumbersome, as well as for REI. So our goal is to make it much more accessible for folks to be able to get their boats in the water. That could certainly mean small sailboats. I believe at some point, I think trailering it's not going to be a launch where you'd be able to trailer a boat in. If you're talking about the docks themselves, these are mainly going to be a floating dock for small personal watercraft to launch from the shore versus being moored there as far as everything I believe we've talked about. But Pam and Zarian, please chime in.
We will have improved boat for transient moorage, which are smaller boats that come in off Lake Washington and allow access to the park and up to Main Street. Can those be used by people rowing or I guess sailing into them? And I don't see any reason why they could not be even today used in that manner. If you're talking
Right.
about a group lesson type of a situation where the whole area is taken over, we have certain requirements because we've been provided grants from the state, and we have to have a minimum, we need to provide a minimum of 14 transient moorage spaces for folks who come sailing, floating into the site. So whether we would have capacity to host some kind of program would definitely have to be determined, when we had more real specific information about the marina and the marina was going to change uses.
I would add that we do have, as Pam said, we do have an existing transit use. I would only see that improving to include more use for sailboats if that became a need because of the design of the future transit moorage being floating instead of a fixed dock as they are now. So there would be an opportunity there. On the other side with the non-motorized boats, as Scott mentioned, there will be improvements made to the existing programs that we have out there. So undetermined at the time, but certainly there's some opportunities in the future.
All right, we have a couple neighbor related questions. One for Scott. Will this project affect the trees in front of Whalers Cove? Whose jurisdiction is this under?
Are you in particular? I'm wondering if we're talking about the large laurel hedge that divides the properties. And if that's the case, if we are talking about the laurel hedge in itself, I don't know that we've had the grading completely worked out along that edge, but Andy, you might want to chime in with anything you might know about or grade changes we're going to have there and whether that buffering hedge would be affected, because it does straddle exactly on the property line.
Yeah, the current intent, and this will need to be confirmed as we get more detailed site survey information, but our current thinking is that we would be able to preserve that. If we do impact it, we would look to replace it. We do want some landscape buffer there, not only from the public side, but also for concerns over the private property.
I think I would add that if we're talking about trees in general, we would like to make that shoreline experience as fantastic as possible, which will include landscape. And that would include some trees. Tree species has not been at all thought about. That's much further down in the design process, but we would absolutely remain cognizant of maintaining the neighbors' views and being very selective in the landscape that we chose. And when you're saying whose purview is that under, I think that falls under Parks' responsibility to make sure that we are and remain good neighbors.
Great, thank you all for that. I just want to note that we have about 25 minutes left of our Q&A, and we have a lot of questions today. So I appreciate all of your patience as we get through these. And if there's any that we don't get to tonight, we can follow up later. But with that, I will keep us moving here. So another question for Pam. The kite site currently hosts the Bayview. What steps will the city take to assist the displaced residents? What is the timeline between that and the start of construction? Oh, you're muted, Pam.
Thank you, Sarah. As mentioned, we would have 3 years at least to construction starting next year. The city is absolutely interested in making sure that we support whatever needs to happen. Exactly what kind of assistance that we will be able to provide has not yet been determined. But we'd have at least, assuming that we make this conclusion, we're moving forward with the kite site, I'm going to say in the first quarter of 2025, we would have 3 years to work this out. Did I answer that? Is there more I didn't answer? Nope, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Question for Pam and Scott. You both are very popular this evening. Has the city considered establishing a community or activity center that can host weddings and larger events similar to the Rose Hill Community Center in Mukilteo?
I'm going to let Pam take that one.
We have some beautiful community centers that offer opportunities to rent spaces for weddings and other events. I would point to Crossroads Community Center, South Bellevue Community Center, North Bellevue Community Center, and even the Northwest Arts Center as having certainly public spaces that you can rent for private events. But if you're referring to here at Meydenbauer Bay, no, we haven't considered that. That has not been requested. We wouldn't have, I'll just say, the infrastructure to support something along those lines.
Great, thank you, Pam. Question for Guy. What provisions are being made to ensure privacy for residents across the bay and for those properties to preserve a green view? You have talked about screening for adjacent neighbors, but not those across the water, and the proposed design currently looks invasive.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I'm trying to project a little bit into that question to understand what would be invasive, and I'm thinking it's perhaps the Baywalk, but I want to reiterate what we're comparing this against is what's there now, what's in the PLUP, and then what the design entails. So what's there now is boathouses, not invasive, but also not horribly attractive. What was going to be there in the PLUP, an elevator tower and a deck looking straight across the bay. And one of the things that the Baywalk does is it's working to reorient views not straight across the bay, but out towards the mouth of the bay, because we think that's where people are going to be drawn to look anyway. So I think that the orientation is starting to address that. And again, this isn't that high, so I really don't think it will be invasive. I can understand that being a concern, and I think it's a fair concern, but putting my park design hat on, and this is a common refrain we get when we do parks, is people are concerned about impacts and people are concerned that they're going to be on display. But what I can tell you from years and years of experience is that we design really thoughtful places that people love, including the residents. And I'm confident this wouldn't be invasive, and that you will ultimately love this element. And then in terms of the green component you said, one thing I want to stress is that is that's a shoreline right now that is a bulkhead and asphalt. And that whole shoreline is going to be brought back. It's all going to be greened up. So I think it's going to be a beautiful piece of shoreline that you're going to be able to see that you don't see at all now from across the bay, because you're looking at boathouses and docks.
Thank you, Guy. We have a couple questions related to the kite sites. So for Guy and Mike, what is the projected height of the viewing deck sorry, one second. The viewing deck above the pavilion building as compared to the corner of Main Street and 100th Avenue Southeast.
Guy, I could take this one if you don't mind. Okay. So that's something that we would need to develop more, but at this point, we think that if you go up with an accessible ramp slope from the corner, the first turn, the turn that kind of looks out west over the bay for the first time and kind of looks down at phase 1 of Meydenbauer Park, that's roughly between 10 and maybe 12 feet above the corner, depending on how we kind of lay that out and develop it. So it's not real tall from Lake Washington Boulevard. It's not going to be a tall, imposing structure, but you do get up and get a pretty good look there. And then we kind of zigzagged it back toward the east a little bit, and we're studying how far up we can safely put people for fire egress and all that stuff. So probably another 3 or 4 feet up vertically for a total of maybe 14 feet is probably about the distance above the corner. But by the time you look out toward the south, you'll have a pretty good view out. But from across the water, based on the last question, this building is going to be very low slung with a lot of trees and plantings sort of obscuring views to it from the south, from across the bay.
I'm going to piggyback in too. Like there is so much design left to be done. And again, we really are wanting to be thoughtful and be good neighbors. And so one of the things that this is we have we have like a 20-foot setback to our building, working to keep trees, working to add trees. And like one of the things, and this I'm sharing a thought that is to be developed, but if you were to look at our graphic and kind of read into it, one of the things we're doing is not having necessarily people going right up to that edge, but actually having a foreground of planting. So rather than kind of going up to an edge and looking right down on a roof or at someone's window, holding them back from the edge so they get the distant view because that's the desired view, and a foreground of planting in front of them so they're not going right up to the edge and not kind of looking right down and into adjacent properties. So it's a subtle little detail, but it's in our rendering that we have landscape along that edge. To again, we're really being thoughtful about being good neighbors. And I will say this is one of the great evolutions from the PLUP, which was orienting views very much towards the apartments. And what we've been able to do is orient views towards the bay and the open water.
Thank you so much, Guy. And to clarify, PLUP is Park and Land Use Plan. It's a fun acronym, but I know there's a lot of acronyms to keep track of these days. Okay, another question for Guy. Could you consider an option for a viewing area at the bottom of the kite site, which already provides awesome views, instead of building the bay connector and its associated impacts?
I think it's a yes and, because I'll bring it back. Like we actually were thrilled the first time before we'd even had the opportunity to work on this project, we fell in love with those 2 trees on the kite site, and we think they're worth saving, and they've become a key part of what we're doing. And so we do have the bay walk. We'll come back to that piece in a minute. But B, we do think an on-grade connection, almost like a deck that wraps around the base of those trees, and then you can step down. We think that that's a great place. It wouldn't be accessible. And I think that that is this key part of a grand connection wants to be grand and universally accessible. And with the elevation that we need to accommodate, we can't get down to that elevation by the time solely contained on the kite site. And it's not what was in the cutely named PLUP either. And so we're trying to honor the intent of that PLUP and build on it. So we love that idea, but I think there is clearly, both in the PLUP and now with the bay walk in lieu of an elevator, a need functionally to have that elevated element there to provide seamless and I think, a treasured journey that also provides the accessibility requirements. But I want to stress, like, I love that idea. Like, there's so much more design to be done, but I think it's a yes and, not a one would replace the other.
Thank you, Guy. We have a community member from the Meydenbauer Bay Neighbors Association who is curious, when will you make the parking study information available to the public? And Pam, would you like to answer this one?
Sure, we'd be happy to put that on the website. I think it's undergoing some amount of edits right at this moment, but we will be posting it there.
And we have a couple websites where you can find information. There's the Engaging Bellevue one, which hosts our survey and a lot of engagement. And then there's also the city Meydenbauer Bay Park website. And that is where a lot of information will live long-term, just to clarify for folks trying to find further details. Okay. Question for Scott. Will the stairs from Whalers Cove to Lake Washington Boulevard be maintained or improved so that residents have access to the new pedestrian pathways along Lake Washington?
Boy, that's a good question, and one I can't honestly answer. I think that's going to be more when we get into the design of that stretch from Main Street to the Phase 1 park. I think that'll be a good question to make sure transportation takes into account, as they'll be actually probably taking the lead on that whole design.
All right, thank you.
Kevin's still here. Maybe he'd like to chime in on that one as well.
I don't have anything more to add, Scott. There's been no design work done at all on anything more than restriping the street for bike lanes.
If you go to Engaging Bellevue, you can find our team's project contact information. And so if you want to follow up at a later date when there might be more clarity, you can always do that.
Yeah, and you can certainly stay in touch with me at the city as things progress over the next couple of years, and I'll be happy to keep you informed.
Thank you, Scott. Question for Andy. Will the beach area below the terminus of 99th Avenue right-of-way be retained?
Yes, absolutely. And that we know that's currently the area where private or the PPVs, personal watercraft, are being launched from. And the intent is to actually make that area better than it is today and easier to access for people who are bringing their watercraft down to the park.
I want to chime in real quickly with that area is one of the areas. That area, the beach all the way up to the street, is one of the areas that we're really excited about. I mean, we're talking about a new phase to this park, but part of the beauty of it is this phase can actually make the existing park more functional. And so right now, the promenade in the existing park sort of ends at 99th and in a very steep asphalt grade that is not a promenade. And one of the things we're able to put in addition to that beach and rethinking that area and the area around the ice house, is actually extending the promenade outside of the street and still meeting accessibility. So it's really creating a much stronger promenade along the whole of the waterfront. And that beach is still part of that experience. But I just wanted to sort of point out the promenade is much more continuous now and more accessible now too.
Thanks, Guy. Question for Zarian. Will public fishing be allowed off any of the piers? People currently fish off of the existing Crescent dock.
So fishing is prohibited from the piers currently, and I would definitely expect that to continue. Mainly for safety reasons. We wouldn't want to commingle fishing activity anywhere where there's boats moored. By design, we created an area on the curvilinear pier for fishing because it's pedestrian only. So that would continue to be, in my mind, what we would go forward with.
Thank you, Zarian. All right, quick question for Pam. What are the park hours? When will it be closed at night? Oh, you're muted again.
Whoops. This design process hasn't talked about park hours at all or park design. The park is currently open until 11. The same time has the same hours as downtown park. And we haven't addressed a change there. So again, this is about design and phasing of the new park and the second phase of development.
Thank you, Pam. All right, this might be a bit of a clarification from an earlier question. I'm gonna pass this off to Guy. Could you consider an option for a viewing area at the bottom of Kite Site? Instead of building the Bay Connector and its associated impacts, could the path from Main Street be down 101st Avenue if it's at an acceptable accessibility grade?
I think the answer is the answer I gave earlier to the very comparable question, which is we can't get an accessible path from 100th and Main down without using that added height, and it's why that added element was in the PLUP as well. And now I'm laughing every time I say PLUP because I'm realizing how silly it sounds. So I think it's that same answer. We can't achieve universal accessibility on the Kite Site. There's just not enough room to absorb all that grade.
Okay, another question for you, Guy. What will be used to ensure lighting is shielded from going into nearby residences and materials aren't overly reflective?
Super good question. I will say, like, that is such a design detail that we're not there, but just so you know, we are dreaming about lighting now. And I think that the answer is, because even though there's so much design to do, we actually think that we've talked about that lighting and the idea of putting it in a way that it's never oriented towards the immediate neighbors. And what we see happening, I'm going to use like hand wavy symbols because like we're so early in this concept, but we really want pools of light that are shined from low, and definitely no uplights or things like that. So there would not be glare. And what's cool about this particularly where my brain is very focused is with this question is the new stretch of promenade that's extending along this shoreline section, but also the elevated bay walk. But I think the intent would be lighting is incredibly low. Incredibly, that sounds silly, but that we're erring on low lighting, pools of light, and on, for example, the Bay Connector, we wouldn't be putting light poles on there. I think it would be lit from the handrails or bollards or things like that. So really low level, non-glare light. Love the question, and my promise is we're going to do amazing lighting that will be thoughtful for ecology and humans.
Thank you, Guy. And thank you to everyone in the audience for your patience as we move through these questions. I appreciate how everyone has been so engaged tonight, and we have 5 minutes left and we can't get to all the questions in this amount of time. And so we will do our best to follow up with you and to share an FAQ on our website to get your questions answered. With that, question for Pam. How will the Parks, Transportation, and Utilities departments work together to implement Lake Washington Boulevard sidewalk improvements? Where will the funding come for this project, and what department is taking responsibility for implementing this project?
How? Okay, I'll start with how. I think that's where the question started. I'm going to say that any improvements that the parks does, which will be on park property or that has park frontage, we will be working with utilities and transportation through the design process. And we will additionally be required, even through a permit review process, to work with utilities and transportation. I think from a who's taking the lead, I think I answered that from a parks perspective. Any place where we don't have frontage, and it is in the right of way, transportation is the responsible party and department for making those changes. Most all of our funding, city's going through a funding process right now. So we have park department funding, transportation funding, and utilities funding. And there is a great deal of coordination from a budget perspective, as well as, you know, what the projects are and what the priorities are. And we work hard to work well together. We might have different missions or agendas. Parks versus roadways, for instance. But we collaborate and will collaborate. I would imagine that funding for right-of-way improvements will be determined through the priorities in the budget process for transportation, just as they are for parks. Did I answer all of those bits and pieces? And do you have anything to add, Kevin?
I will add that the current designing work and implementation for the bike lanes on Lake Washington Boulevard is fully funded. And so we don't have to ask for additional money for that. The sort of the larger scale connection along the south side of Lake Washington Boulevard would be a new project that City Council would have to approve a budget for. And since it hasn't been designed yet, we have really no concept for how much it would cost, but it would be a line item in the budget.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, I think we have time for a couple more questions. I believe I might have missed this one for Andy. Will the beach area below the terminus of 99th Avenue right of way be retained?
I think we did get that one.
We got that one?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
and it will be.
Awesome. Well, thank you for reiterating that. All right. Andy and Pam, another question for you. Can you please recap the different phases you are planning?
So I think an important clarification there. Right now, we are still working on reviewing cost estimates and identifying what funding is available for the next phase. And it is looking like the highest priority based on community input. And what we're hearing is that the kite site, what we reviewed tonight is the kite site would be the included in the next phase of work. That's risen to the highest priority. And then what we have left for funding would look to provide some kind of connection from the kite site along the shoreline to the existing phase 1 park. And that is what would be in that phase. Hopefully I understood that question correctly.
Yeah, and Andy, to be clear, because I know it can be a little confusing as to with the elevated walkway likely would not be part of this phase 2.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, we are pretty close to the end of this community webinar. And I just want to extend my gratitude for everyone being here today, for all of your questions. And I really hope that we can hear more from you on Engaging Bellevue. You can scan the QR code to take the survey anytime before December 15th, or you can Google Engaging Bellevue and find this project on the homepage as well. We also have our project team's contacts up here. So if you would like to comment or clarify a question, you can reach out to those folks. Again, we will also try to share commonly asked questions on our website. And lastly, I just want to highlight all of the people and firms that made this project come to be. So you can see those down at the bottom there. And I will turn it over to Pam and Andy for final words. And whoever else would like to extend thank yous.
Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your questions. We will look forward to also posting those on Engaging Bellevue. I am thrilled to be working on this project with Scott and this team, and just as a Bellevue resident myself, am really looking forward to seeing us progress here, and I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, and I excuse me, I just wanted to say too, I wanted to thank everybody for their questions tonight and your interest in the project. To echo what Pam was saying, it's been great working on this project and exploring what wonderful opportunities there are to expand what a great, beautiful asset this park is for the city of Bellevue. And we look forward to your continued input on this as we move forward through the design. All right, thanks everybody.